Hello, welcome to Spatial at UNCP. I'm Jesse Rouse from the Department of Geology and Geography.
I'm Nathan Philippi from the Department of Geology and Geography.
And today we're not going to be doing too much with
Anything.
ARC.
Oh,
We're going to instead be talking about those things that fly around in the sky occasionally and what you can do with them on campus, what you can't do with them on campus, and
can't shoot at them. Not on
can't.
campus.
Well, yes, you're not supposed to be. You're not supposed to have firearms. So that's a whole other set of conversations that you can also find in policies. But if you head over, as we will now, to the UNCP webpage, you can see the drones/unmanned aircraft systems. And generally speaking, on campus, we're looking at quadcopters. We're looking at these little things that we can watch fly around the world using their four little props, as you can see up in the sky past my elbow. But there are other options as well, as we'll talk about at the end. But on campus, we are limited in what we can do because of health and safety reasons, right? Make
Of
sense?
course.
Yeah.
Yep. Health is always important. Does it have to wear a mask? No,
As of right now, yes, you do.
I meant the drone.
It does not.
How does a
And you're
person
standing
get
yourself.
to be able to fly a drone?
Yes. So in order to be able to fly, you have to meet the policy requirements. And I'm guessing the policy requirements are going to change sometime in the future because the FAA requirements for higher education have changed as well. But right now, they're from the original guidelines. And so we have to meet certain requirements. And so right now, as far as I know, only 2 people on campus meet these requirements. And so if you want to be able to fly as well on campus or for your work at UNCP, even if you're not on campus, you need to, one, have FAA certification as a UAS pilot. Now, some of you may be pilots. This is a separate certification. You don't have to take the test again because it is the same knowledge test that you take whenever you get your pilot's license, for the most part. But you do have to go through the application process to be able to get that certification.
So does this depend on the size of the drone? Because I have a drone right here. Would I be able to fly this on campus without a license?
No, not appropriately. No. So
Okay.
according to the policy, to fly on campus at all, you must be FAA certified,
Okay.
and as an employee of the state, you also have to have the North Carolina Department of Transportation certification. So, really quick, the FAA website, there's information on what you need to study. There's lots of information and even sample tests out there. It's 60 questions over 2 hours. Most people I'm aware of take well under an hour to do the 60 questions. You only have to do a 70 or better, so you can be an average student and still be allowed to fly drones commercially. Right?
Very cool.
Okay, so yeah, study for a test, take the test. Then it takes a couple of weeks for it to get processed, and then 2 years later, you've got to do it all over again. Though it's a slightly different test.
Then you can fly drones anywhere, though, right?
Well, you will find out during the
Within.
studying for the test what areas are legal to fly and when is legal to fly and those type of things. So
No,
I
that's
won't.
meant by Eagle.
Yeah. So it's yes is the upshot, is that you can fly for commercial purposes. So you can even start a side business videoing weddings, and this will cover you. It's $150 for the test and for the license. Like I said, there will be changes for educational users. Right now, for higher ed, we are covered under a provision that allows us to essentially fly as recreational users. And our students in our classes can technically, under our supervision, fly because we have licenses. And I say we, that's me and Michael Liddy over in communications, university communications, not mass communications. And so, yeah, it technically is legal for faculty who are participating in a class to fly, but it's not part of the university's policy. So legal, yes. Policy, no. That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. Then, like I said, North Carolina has its own separate one. And really, as long as you've studied for the Part 107 FAA test, then you can pass the North Carolina test as long as you flip through the slides they provide you as extra information. Because there's a couple of things like the use of infrared and thermal cameras that are specific to North Carolina. But again, it's mostly things that are on the Part 107 test that show up again in the North Carolina test. And this is free, whereas with the FAA test, you have to go to a certified location. The North Carolina DOT test, you can just take it home. Okay, any questions so far?
You have to go to a certain site to take that?
For the FAA, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for FAA, again, $150. That a lot of that goes to the testing center. Some of it goes to the FAA for your materials. Once you have your FAA and your NCDOT certificates, you'll get an actual card for the FAA and a little paper one to print out from the NCDOT. Then you can let the Office of Health and Safety up in facilities know that you are eligible to fly and that you are interested in doing so. In addition, your device has to be registered. And you may have noticed whenever I held it up before, the lovely blue piece of tape that I have on there, you have to have an external marking of what the registration code is for your device on the device, so that if it falls out of the sky, they know whose it was. I was lazy and just used tape. But that has to be on the outside somewhere. So you've got a certificate from the FAA, you've got a certificate from North Carolina DOT, and you've registered your device. You've let the Health and Safety Office know that you are a person who has all these things. Now, to be able to fly, you have to go to this website and download the UAS approval form. So this is where you basically are saying, this is the purpose of my flight on campus. This is who's piloting, what department I'm with, when I'm going to be doing it. Is it for education, research, public safety? Am I doing this for someone else? If you're doing it as part of a contract or something like that. Details of who, what, when, where, and why. As you'll learn in the FAA, there's three major positions in flying, and one person can have all three. So the pilot, if they're by themselves, can be all three. But you have the pilot, the remote person in charge, and you have an observer. So if you're going to have someone who's observing to make sure that your drone's not going to hit anything or nothing's going to hit it, then include that person's name. If you're going to have someone else besides the person with the license flying, that needs to be in there as well in the activity overview. Then the operator information. Again, all this is from your certificates that you get at the beginning. So your FAA certification number, your North Carolina operator's number, and the registration number for your device or devices. Again, we have multiple devices in the Department of Geology and Geography that were purchased by the Kids in the Garden grant. And so whenever we're working with students, middle school and ours as well, we generally have more than one device out at a time. We're very careful to make sure they're not flying the exact same space, but they are out. So we'll have more than one registration number in that case. Same thing with classes. And then you'll provide the information for that make and model that you're going to be using. You'll mark on the map where on campus you're going to be flying. I will say they prefer, especially during class times, for you to not fly over campus. And this makes sense. There are issues of flying over crowds that are part of FAA requirements. We're kind of never really to the point of that level of crowd, but except for at the football stadium during football games. But generally speaking, they want to keep it a little bit out of sight to discourage, to some extent, people from just grabbing their drone and running out and flying it, because, of course, there are policies. And so they could have their device confiscated, fined. I can't remember what the policy says, but yeah. And then you submit it to be approved. So those are the folks who are signing off, and that's based on the current policy. And again, if the policy changes to reflect the changes in FAA requirements, this might change as well, just as part of the procedure.
How long does it usually take for approval? How many days in advance do you have to submit one of these forms?
You must submit 2 full weeks in advance. So if you're going to fly on the 14th, then you need to have it in by the 30th or 31st of the month before. So it's 2 full business weeks. So not 10 days, but 14 days. So that's a very good question. So now that you know how and why you can fly on campus, let's talk about what we do fly on campus.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that next. What do you usually use with drone?
For, like I said, Michael Liddy and I, who are the 2 current pilots that are using them on campus, are both generally flying this, which is a DJI Mavic 2 Pro. There we go. And it's a foldable little device. Has a camera on the front, which of course is what we want it for, and relatively inexpensive as these things go. So this was about $1,500, and that's kind of the top end of the prosumer line or consumer line of drones, and then we jump up into the $3,000 to $4,000 and up whenever we get into the true professional level drones. And I don't think we would have arguments that we use them enough to scale up to that. So this is what we use most of the time when we're collecting data. He's collecting generally videos. I'm generally collecting data for map purposes, as I'll show you in a minute. Any questions about that? This is mostly me lecturing that.
It's all right.
I'll just keep doing that then. So that's a DJI.
Every once in a while.
That's true. So that's a DJI, and they have a ton of different devices. And right now, we in the Department of Geology and Geography have that one and 2 parallel
You
Anafis.
use to control the drone with.
And I'll show you the Anafi in just a second. But for the Mavics, we're also, I think the Mass Comm department has already purchased a couple of Mavic Minis as well, because we're co-teaching a class this fall for drones for applications. Let's see. So you use a controller for the most part. So here's the controller for the Mavic.
Oh, okay.
Oops,
Just
there
like
you go.
car control.
Yep, it's a little RC controller. Again, these are nothing more than 4-propped remote control helicopters or prop-based remote control planes. They're the same thing that people have been using for decades. It's just that legislation changed at the end of 2018 that is changing how we can interact with these. So even recreational use is changing, but they haven't finalized how that's going to change yet. Okay, so yeah, we have the Mavic 2 Pro, and they have the Mavic Mini that we're going to be using for the class along with the Anafis. And so whenever we're using these type of devices, they're meant to share information, to gather data. A lot of them are being used for social media, but our purposes are much more data driven, to be able to map an area or to share information about an area. Right?
Yeah. So is there any specific places on campus that you are currently mapping?
Yeah. We have been mapping the... Oh, and by the way, this is what the sensors look like. We've been mapping the campus. So whenever we go in and look at ArcMap, like I said, we're not going to do it a lot, but here's ArcMap. And what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to turn off the drone data. So this is aerial imagery from, I believe, 2017, we figured out. Over here is the apartments, baseball fields, health sciences, the new health building. So most things are on that image from 2017, but there has been construction since then. So back in January, and I do this fairly regularly, I flew campus, and as you can see, since 2017, we've added 4 new buildings to this set of apartments over here, a solar array as well. And we can go over to the other side of campus and see that we have the new road. So if I swipe this real quick, you can see the difference between what the road looked like and what it looks like now.
Big change.
You'll also notice since it was January, there's no construction going on. But I've been flying the construction pretty regularly, so we can go in here and take a look at that as well. There we go. So this is what it looks like as of last Friday, the 28th, I believe, of 26th of June. And we can use the swipe tool again to see what it looked like in January, where we had parking lot, and what it looks like now. And the reason to do this, of course, is to have a lot of updating. We have our own ability to update the data when we want to be able to say, okay, well, something new is there. We want to be able to see it so we can go out and fly it. We also can get to much higher resolution data. So if you notice, as each one of these draws, they're a little bit less blurry. The data in the background is about 6-inch data. The data that's not showing up right now, let's go back out to 1 to 600. So this campus data is about 1 or 2 inch resolution, and here we're sub 1 inch resolution. So each pixel is covering less than an inch on the ground. So
what is your altitude?
For the campus, it was around 300 feet. Yeah, so I used 300 feet for the campus. That way, fly a little bit faster. And we're looking for the whole thing, so not as much detail. And for this, I believe it's 175 feet. It's either 200 feet or 175, depending on whether the crane was up. It looks like the crane was up, so it's probably 200 feet.
So where does this data get sent then from the drone?
We take all these images, and each one of these blue squares represents what one of these images would look like in terms of its location, and that's generated based on the accelerometer and GPS in the drone itself. So we can look and see each one of these images is represented by a square on the screen.
Neat.
From there, we take this data and we process it, and I've been using Metashape, Agisoft's Metashape. There's a lot of photogrammetry software out there, but because of cost, this was the one we ended up going with. So we've turned on the first product, where we go through, the software aligns the images and creates a point cloud from it. And this one isn't doesn't have a lot of detail. You can see that, we have holes over here. You'll see later on those are trees. You can see things like the road where, because of the color, it reflects very strongly, so it's not showing up just yet. But we can go through and change that from the point cloud to a dense point cloud. So if you're familiar with the idea of LiDAR, light detection and ranging, where we're creating a point cloud based on a light pulse from a helicopter, a plane, UAV, this is basically creating a very similar product, but instead of using those light pulses, it's using the difference between images. So where we have overlap, it's looking at that overlap and creating points, and that overlap tells it the elevation difference between those points in the images. So that's what photogrammetry is doing. And as you can see, in this point cloud, we have everything down to the steel structure. We can then go through and take those original images and lay it over the elevation point cloud and get a much more precise image. So then we can go through and rotate it as much as we want.
You make 3D images out of it?
This is in fact a 3D image. You will notice as we look into the interior of the building along this edge, since it cannot see through this, we're only getting the edge as 3D. But that's still, fairly impressive for something that was flying 175 feet above it with the camera just tilted a little bit forward.
Yeah, not a professional grade product either, as you were saying.
Well, I mean, it's a strong sensor. It's not a professional sensor. It's not a full frame sensor by any means, but we're getting a lot of information here. Now, for us, of course, in geography, we tend to worry about being most interested in this particular perspective. But there's a lot of other things that we can do with this as well in terms of the 3D. So if you're looking at construction like this, one of the things that we wanted to be able to do was watch the 3D model grow over time whenever we go through and put it all together at the end. We're also taking images in a circle around the site, and I believe I closed that, but Michael Liddy is taking those, and since we have a number of pictures that go all the way around and we're taking them over time, he's created a time lapse where every few frames, every few points, you're switching to a new day. So we've got this going back into very late February or early March, so you can see 3 months, 4 months almost of construction and how it's changed over time.
This would come in real handy if you're doing environmental studies. Wanted to see the erosion of anything, I guess, really, or the increasing or decreasing of glaciers.
Yeah, and so whenever we look at this technology in terms of various use cases, we can look at things like drone mapping for dunes, and this has heavily been used in coastal Carolinas for whenever we've had images. There we go. A hurricane go through. Oh, this is looking at other types of dunes, but whenever we have hurricanes go through, of course, it has massive impact, and it's not always easy to get a plane up right after a hurricane because they may not be around nearby. So it takes a little while for them to get to the site that you want to get the data for. You want to get data as quick as possible for recovery purposes, for insurance purposes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're seeing more and more drones going up and capturing the coastline after these events. Everything from just a severe nor'easter all the way up to full-blown storms. We do see insurance using this a lot for these type of events as well.
Remember, after the hurricanes, with all the flooding, the drones were used to monitor that.
Yeah, because of course those numbers are changing and the edges of where the water is changing daily. And, a lot of it's in areas that aren't easy to get to when it's dry and almost impossible to get to whenever you're talking about having 3 or 4 feet of water in an area to try to delimit the edges. So yeah, that's kind of it. If you are a person who wants to fly a project off campus but for campus, again, there's definitions of how you deal with that in the policy as well. So it's not just something you have to be mindful of when you're on campus. You also have to be mindful of it whenever you're flying off campus for a project that's related to work.
Very interesting.
I don't know.
Fun to learn.
Anything else to highlight this week?
That I can think of.
Okay. Now again, you saw that we created this in, so we went from these small images to one large image, a mosaic that we created in Metashape, exported that as either a TIFF or a JPEG 2000, and then brought that into ArcMap. It's just as simple as that to be able to do that. But you may notice that between the images, especially the 2 drone images, there we go, that there's just a little bit of offset, about 2 feet between them. And there's not that, and you can especially see it on the road where the newer image is about 2 feet to the right compared to the one on the bottom. But you can go through and correct these because, of course, the drone's GPS isn't perfect. So you can go through and georectify your image so that you can have it line up to your base imagery for better comparison purposes. So that's just using the georectify tool, or georeferencing, tool in ArcMap. Then you just use control points and tie locations from your base image to your new image so that it aligns better with that original image that you want to use. Anything else? No? Okay. Well, next week we'll definitely be back to a topic that is more interactive. I believe we're talking about analysis. You wanted to look a little bit about health analysis, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got the spread of the current disease.
Well, we'll look at a spread of a disease.
Okay.
I'm not sure we'll have good enough data to be able to
The corona?
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, COVID.
Well,
Corona, or it's COVID.
virus versus disease, it's a very fluid conversation point, but yes, you're correct.
Everything's fluid.
When you're talking about disease, it would be COVID. Okay, so that's about it for this week. We will be back on the Tuesday after the holiday, so that'll be what, the 8th, I guess?
Right.
To look now. Yeah, that's right. So have a good holiday weekend.
Yeah. All right. Bye.